finish on time. Next up, somebody that I've known for a very long time, actually, and haven't seen for ages, so it's really nice that you're here today. A font of all knowledge, actually, when it comes to talking about young people's engagement and attitudes towards physical activity and sport. She's going to be exploring the insight and the challenges facing young people and our sector in terms of engaging them. So please welcome Sport England's Director for Children and Young People, Jayne Molyneux.
Everybody's now panicking, thinking, why has she got hold of this? Richard, does this, if I use this work? I'm looking for people. We'll see how we go on. It's really good to follow Rhiannon, but there was Sharon. There was two things, as in, I was a bit worried about my hamstrings when we were doing head, shoulder, knees and toes. And I think the 4:30 alarm got the better of me because I got my nose and my eyes mixed up. So, but I think that was a really good way in terms of getting us active. And I will do a little bit of activity, and everyone's sitting there going, oh no, what are you going to get us doing? I'm really pleased to be here today, and it's great to be able to speak to you about an area that's really passionate to us in Sport England, I'm sure really passionate to you in the audience. You've got a really interesting and varied agenda today, and some great speakers. So for the next probably 15-20 minutes or so, I'm going to focus on young people and about how do we, and collectively, that's just not about Sport England, this is about all of us in the room, people in the audience, on the platform, ensure that children and young people have a positive attitude towards sport and physical activity. I mean, obviously, we could spend the whole day focusing on this, so I'm going to quick snapshot, and I've got 3 challenges that collectively we all need to address to try to have an impact on children and young people's attitudes now, but obviously when they get older later in life, that they will continue to take part in sport and physical activity. So, just before we do that, we're just going to set in terms of context the challenge we are facing. So, can I just put the lights up a bit? Otherwise, this is where I test my hand-eye coordination, my throwing skills, and somebody. Have we got a volunteer in the audience? Don't say anything at the back because I cannot throw that this far. Okay, fantastic, brilliant. Okay, so the question for you, it's like, oh, I wish I'd never volunteered now, is how many young people, what is the percentage, or how many young people are aged 5 to 15 in millions in England? Have a guess. How many young people are there, aged 5 to 15? Go on. Do you have a stab?
Gosh. I have to admit, I have a dyslexic problem here. So I would say 15 million?
15 million. Okay, that's fine. So if you think it's higher than 15 million, stand up. Okay, if you think it's lower than 15 million, stand up. Okay, if you think it's lower than 5 million, sit down. Oh, very nice. Okay, so just sit down for a minute. So the actual, in terms of population, there are 6.87 million 5 to 15-year-olds. It's not bad, you nearly got my next. So it's 13% of the population. So it's a big old group, not quite as much as 15, but still a big old challenge. Do you think it's going to get higher or lower as we progress on to 2020 and 2025? If you think it's going to get more, stand up. Oh, interesting. Okay. Sit down. Okay, you're right. Actually, it's going to increase. So by 2020, there's going to be about 7.54 million young people aged 5 to 15, and then even increase again by 2025, so 8.14 million. So 14% of the population are going to be aged 5 to 15. That's massive. And that's why the challenge we face is quite significant. And certainly we as Sport England, as policy makers, obviously as funders, cannot do it alone. We need, as everybody's talking about, a whole sector change and a whole response to this. And obviously, if we look at the pictures, obviously, clearly we want to go from young people who are clearly distraught on the left to young people on the right who are really enjoying taking part in sport and physical activity. And it could be something, they're not physically literate. So when they come to take part in sport or physical activity, the fact that they can't catch a ball, the fact that they can't run and jump, because obviously we've not supported them under 5, means that they don't enjoy it. You know, that poor little chap looks absolutely distraught, doesn't he? I've been there a few times myself, really, actually, many, many years ago. But that's the challenge that we all face. We all know the big challenge about trying to raise activity levels. I think not a day goes by where we don't have something in the news. Obviously, there's a news today, obviously the results from Birmingham University saying that, schools do not make a difference in terms of childhood obesity. And of course, they're only one small part of the jigsaw. Again, that's why we keep saying it's a whole sector response in terms of we all need to work together to tackle this challenge. We know, we've seen on the slides this morning around the Chief Medical Officer says that children and young people need to have 60 active minutes a day. But I'm sure you'll also agree that as well as being active, they need to enjoy it. If they enjoy it, they're more likely to continue to take part when they're aged 5 to 15 and continue when they get older in life. So, I also think it's important in terms of set this back to our vision in terms of what we're trying to do with our strategy in Sport England. And those of you familiar will have seen this slide probably plenty of times. But it also relates to children and young people. It needs to be important to remember that children and young people are customers too. We want a world where children feel able to take part in sport, physical activity, or just be active. We recognise that some children and young people will be fit and will be talented, but the vast majority are not. And the stats themselves speak. They tell us that. So we need a sports sector that welcomes all children and young people, regardless of who they are, meets the needs and treats them as individuals and values them as customers. It's well documented that we are competing in it's a very competitive world. We're trying to compete for children and young people's leisure time. So we have to treat them as customers, understand what their needs are, because otherwise they will always choose the television, they'll always choose their iPads, they'll always choose their mobile phones. So we really need to think about what children and young people want. So in terms of setting our sort of outline in our strategy, you can see we're about building stronger foundations through personal competence, enjoyment, and avoiding bad or negative experiences. So it's a case of, I can do that. And again, the presentation this morning, if a child at the age of 5 is not physically literate, they may think, I can't do that. I can't catch a ball. I can't run. I can't jump. So they're likely to have a really negative experience. And that's quite shocking at the age of 5 if they don't feel that they can do anything. So we really need to work hard, to focus on competence and enjoyment, avoid negative experiences, and as I've said before, recognise that children are customers too. You'll be aware that our remit has gone down to 5 upwards. Now, I'm sure there's some people in the room, not in the least of the presentation this morning, will say, but why don't you start early years? And of course, we recognise there is a massive challenge from 0 to 5. But even with an organisation that, some people think we've got, an infinite amount of resources, we don't. So we have to target it where's needed. So we do recognise there is lots to be done at 0 to 5, but in terms of where we will start our resources are from 5 upwards. So I'm not saying as in we don't care, it's really, really important, but we can only put our resources, we can't cover everything, because the resources that are needed from 0 to 5 are fairly significant, and we probably use most of our funding on 0 to 5. So in terms of, I've got 3 challenges for us and for you. So the first challenge we're going to look at is about children having narrower perceptions of what constitutes physical activity. And obviously coupled with that, their awareness and recognition of the reasons and benefits is much narrower than adults. And we know this because when we were doing some cognitive testing for the Active Lives Children Young People survey, which I'll talk about later, we asked young people, so we're testing out the questions, about physical activity. And a lot of them just automatically thought of competitive sport. They didn't understand what physical activity was. So, in terms of what we need to do more, what we need to do is to ensure that children and young people have the opportunity to experience a wide range of experiences. And you in the room can help us to do that. So focus on play, and we know that is really, really important, particularly at the younger age. Let young people try lots of different sports. Focus on fitness. Understand them as customers. Why do they want to take part in sport and physical activity? What are their motives? So at the moment, children and young people say it's very narrow. They don't understand what physical activity is. They'll automatically think of sport. So we need to do more, and I'll talk about how we can influence the people around children, young people, so whether that's adults, whether that's families, coaches, but we need to do more. So what we as Sport England are going to start to do, and obviously we've started to do it as we started to work in our new strategy, is we need to start to shape the supply to increase the opportunities. So focus more on fun and de-stressing, obviously thinking about health and mental well-being, rather than just focus solely on ability, winning or competition. And we know that some of the national governing bodies of sport started to do this. So the FA with their Wildcats programme is very much around fun and enjoyment for the girls. And I know lots of you have probably got activities that focus solely on that. We're not saying that winning in competition isn't important, because there are clearly some children, young people who want to do that, who want to focus on winning in competition, but it can be fun. You know, winning a competition shouldn't be the means to an end. You can make competition fun, you can make focus on ability fun. So I know it's like, you know, they're not rocket science this, but it's also helped to reinforce the challenges that we face. So in terms of challenge 2, and this is more about what goes on in school, about physical education. And for a lot of children, young people, it means it isn't always their choice in a way that it is for adults. It's something that is on the national curriculum and they have to do it, unless they decide, I'm not doing it, I'm turning up with a sick note and that's it, hate it. You know, they do have less opportunities to reject activities. So what should we do about that? We probably need to try and lessen the poor experience of physical education in school. Now that's really hard for us as an organisation because we're focused on community sport. And obviously that is the remit of the Department for Education. But one of the things we do, obviously working closely with one of our partners like obviously Ali and her team at the Youth Sport Trust, is try and influence the Department for Education to understand in terms of what should be delivered in terms of the physical education curriculum. I know Ali will probably touch on that a little bit more in her bit about secondary school, because that's a real focus. When we ask adults, why don't you take part in sport or physical activity? No surprises. The first thing a lot of them say is, I hated PE at school. I had a really bad experience. And there are probably some of you in the audience that can resonate with that. I hated it. But obviously, as you've got older, you understand the benefits of taking part in sport and physical activity, why it's good for your mental health and well-being. It might be that you're doing it for a charity, for good causes. But a lot of children and people just don't. They just get turned off, they just hate it. So in terms of us in Sport England, one of the things we're doing, and again working with colleagues like the Youth Sport Trust, the Association for Physical Education, and EFDS, is try and do some work in secondary schools, obviously looking at specific training for PE teachers, but other educational professions within schools, to focus on so that children and young people have a greater experience. So trying to work with those teachers, the other adults in schools, to understand why it's important to be physically active. We hear lots in the news about young people's mental well-being. Again, we know that physical activity can be a great tool, a great target that we'll use to improve young people's mental well-being. So again, that's one of the things we're doing. We're going to be piloting it probably starting later on this term, probably towards Easter, with full rollout probably from the autumn term. And our aim is that we will offer every secondary school in England the opportunity to experience this specific training, and we're really excited about that piece of work. Again, working with some great colleagues. So the final challenge is about adults. And we know that if a young person, I'm going to use his family as an example, if their parents, could be grandparents, have a positive attitude, they are more likely to have a positive attitude. Again, it's not rocket science, but we need to do more about raising the awareness of parents and other adults about the importance of role modelling. There's lots of things out there. Kenny obviously talked around Change for Life clubs, but we need to do more. You know, if we look at the resources, they will talk about this is why your child needs to be active. We need to do more to understand from a parent's point of view, you need to be active too, and this is why it's important about role modelling. So there's lots more we can do there. And in terms of Sport England, you'll be aware that obviously we launched our Families Fund probably about 12 months ago now. So we're putting a lot of investment into projects with families, with children to get active together. We really want to learn from it to say, is this the way to achieve the challenge? A lot of provision is about families will drop their child off and either go shopping or sit and watch them on the sideline. But this is about taking part in sport and physical activity together. Does that make a difference? And the first projects that we're working with, we really want to learn and test that idea. So again, it's a new area of work for us. We're really interested with the results that will come out, and we're working with some really different partners above and beyond the traditional sports partners we work with. So the question is, how are we going to measure that? I think as Kenny said, you've just got to be able to measure it. It's great talking about positive experiences, but how do we know we've made a difference? And again, those of you who have been looked on our website, well, you know if we've launched the Active Lives Children Young People Survey. And that will give us a broad and deep understanding about not just only young people's participation in sport and physical activity, but about their attitudes. If we get this right, it will be the biggest survey in the world. Our target is to have 100,000 young people each year taking part in the survey. No one has ever done that. And I'm pleased to report that as of yesterday, we had 48,000 young people who've taken part. I mean, that is phenomenal. And the information that we will glean will be fantastic, a fantastic resource for us and for you as the sector to really understand. At the moment, we only have the Taking Part survey, which has a very small sample of 1,500. I mean, 48,000 is pretty remarkable. It's a cross-government survey, so of course Sport England, we're administering it with Ipsis Mori. But we're also working with DCMS, the Department for Education, Department for Health, Department for Transport, and obviously DEFRA are really interested in terms of young people settings. So the whole government are interested in this, and we're starting to work with Public Health England as well, because the information that we have will be absolutely world-leading. You see, it's an online survey, so again, it's done through touchscreen, so the results get fed through straight away, no paper survey. We've been through lots of cognitive testing, as I talked about earlier, with children, young people. And the important thing to remember, it's not a school survey. It's not like the old PE and school sports survey we used to have. It's a children and young people survey that happens to be administered through schools. We're also going to use the opportunity to ask teachers some questions, and we're also using the opportunity to ask parents some questions, particularly as in for the questionnaire for 5 to 7-year-olds, we need the parents to help them. So we'll have some fantastic information. And as I said, it will help to measure 4 of the 5 the outcomes in the Sporting Future strategy. So again, we go deeper than just participation levels. We'll understand about their mental well-being, about their attitude to physical activity. And the reason why we've gone for such a huge sample size, it will give us robust local level data. So if we get 100,000 young people, it means every local authority in England will have their own information. And what we're doing now is working with the schools who've taken part in the survey to develop their own bespoke dashboard. So they will have their own school-based information that they can use. So I'm sure you'll agree, it's a really exciting piece of work that we've just started. The results, because obviously we need a whole year of testing, will be this time next year, which is why we're working with schools now to do the dashboard so they can see the results instantaneously. And from that, we will baseline our work going forward, a bit like we announced last week, our baseline with, by 2020, we want to increase the numbers of people who are active by 500,000. So we will use this information to baseline our work with children and young people. So it's not just going to measure positive attitudes, it will measure all of the KPIs that are in Sporting Futures in our strategy, as well as obviously the 5 government outcomes, 4 of the 5. So that's it from me. I don't know if I was probably a bit longer than I thought, but thank you.